The hallway was cold and silent as Ray walked deeper into the lower levels of the research station. He had never been sent this far down before. The walls were darker here, with flickering lights and thick cables running like veins across the floor. His job was simple: repair a damaged power circuit. But something felt strange, like the air itself was heavier. Ray was a young human technician, sent to this isolated base because he followed orders and stayed quiet. Most of the other workers didn't talk to him much, and he didn't mind. He liked machines, they didn't lie or judge, but today something was different. As he checked the power map on his wrist pad, he noticed a strange energy reading, far below the expected levels. Curiosity pulled him toward the source. He followed a side tunnel that wasn't marked on the map. At the end was a steel door, older than the others, sealed tight. A small keypad blinked red beside it. Ray had seen enough systems to guess the password, a simple override, forgotten by time. The door unlocked with a hiss. What he saw inside made him freeze. The room was dim, and in the center was a cage made of reinforced glass. Inside it sat a figure, still, silent, and watching him. She looked almost human. Her skin had a light shimmer, like soft scales under dim light. Her silver hair hung down her back, long and tangled. Her eyes were large and glowing faintly blue. Around her wrists were thick metal cuffs, connected by cables to the wall behind her. She wore a simple gray cloth, torn and worn out. For a moment, neither of them moved. Ray stepped back in surprise. "Sorry, I didn't know anyone was here," he said quietly. She didn't answer, just stared. "I was just fixing the power. Your area had a short." Still no answer. Ray hesitated, then knelt to check the cables near her room. They were cracked and sparking slightly. He worked slowly, not wanting to make sudden moves. She kept watching him, her head tilted slightly. There was no anger in her eyes, only silence and something else, something like sadness. After a few minutes, Ray finished the repair. The lights brightened slightly and the air vents hummed. The room felt less dead now. As he stood up, she finally spoke. "You shouldn't be here." Her voice was soft but firm. It sounded like it hadn't been used in years. "I didn't know this part was active," he replied. "I thought it was just storage. You saw me. That's enough." Ray frowned. "Enough for what?" "For them to erase you, like they erased me." He took a small step closer, careful not to scare her. "I don't understand. Who are you?" "I was made," she said, looking away. "Made for war. They called me a weapon, a monster." Ray's voice lowered. "Are you?" She looked at him again. "Everyone else thinks so." "I don't," he said simply. Her eyes widened slightly. Ray took a breath. "If you really were a monster, you wouldn't be sitting in a cage, calm and quiet. You'd be breaking through that glass." Her lips moved just enough for a small, sad smile. "That's why they locked me away, because I didn't want to fight." Ray stared at her, unsure what to say. For the first time, he saw not a creature, but a girl who had been forgotten. He turned to leave, but paused. "Do you need anything?" She looked surprised. Then she shook her head. As he walked out, her voice stopped him again. "You don't even know my name." He looked back. "What is it?" "I don't have one," she whispered. "Only a number." Ray nodded. "Then I'll come back tomorrow. Maybe we can choose one together." For the first time in years, she felt something strange in her chest, a warmth she couldn't name, hope. The next morning, Ray returned. He walked carefully through the dark hallways again, this time holding a small bag in his hand. Inside were a bottle of clean water, a packet of dried fruit, and a soft towel. He didn't know if she would accept any of it, but he wanted to try. When he reached the door to her cell, he saw her already awake, sitting in the same spot as yesterday. But this time she didn't look surprised to see him. "You came back," she said quietly. Ray nodded and stepped closer. "I said I would. I brought something for you." She watched him silently as he pulled out the items and placed them near the glass barrier. I thought you might need these. The air here is dry, and the food they give, if they give you any, is probably terrible. She didn't move at first. Then slowly, she reached out and touched the edge of the towel through a small opening slot in the glass. Her fingers were thin but steady. I haven't had water this clean in a long time, she said softly. Ray smiled. No one should live like this. She took a small sip and closed her eyes, as if it was something she had missed deeply. You don't even know who I am, she whispered. Then tell me, Ray said. Not your number. I want to know you. She looked at him for a long time. They called me Specimen X9. I was grown in a lab, trained like a machine. My skin is resistant to energy weapons. My eyes can see in the dark. My blood heals fast. They wanted a perfect soldier. Did you fight? He asked. I refused, she replied. They called it a defect. Ray's heart felt heavy hearing her words. That's not a defect, that's courage. She looked down, her voice softer now. No one ever said that before. Ray sat on the floor outside the cell, close enough to see her clearly, but not too close to make her uncomfortable. We should find you a real name, he said after a moment. She raised her eyes. Why? Because names are for people, Ray answered, not objects. She was silent again, but this time, her expression wasn't empty. It was thoughtful. Do you have a name? She asked. Ray chuckled lightly. Yeah, Ray. Just Ray. It's a warm name, she said, almost smiling. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then she spoke again. What if someone finds out? You're coming here? I don't care, Ray said. If they try to stop me, I'll tell them the truth. You're not a danger. They won't believe you. Then I'll keep coming back anyway. For the first time, she moved closer, to the glass wall. The light above flickered, casting soft shadows on her face. In that moment, she didn't look like a weapon. She looked like a lonely girl who had spent too much time in the dark. Ray stood up slowly. I'll come again tomorrow. Maybe we'll find the right name for you then. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him once more. Ray? He turned around. Thank you for not being afraid. Ray gave her a small smile. You're not a monster. You're just someone who's been alone too long. She didn't answer, but after he left, she held the towel tightly in her hands. For the first time in years, she didn't feel forgotten. She felt seen. Ray returned the next day just like he promised. He carried another bag, this time with fresh bread, a small book, and a tiny packet of seeds. He didn't know if the seeds would grow in the dry air of the base, but it was something different, something alive. When he reached the door, the girl was already waiting. You're early, she said. Ray smiled. You were waiting. She didn't deny it. He sat on the floor again, setting the items near the opening in the glass wall. She looked at the bread and tilted her head. It smells real. It is, Ray said. I baked it myself. I found an old kitchen unit in one of the upper levels. She took a small piece, chewing slowly, her eyes closed with the first bite. It's warm. I thought you might like something made with care, Ray said softly. Then he held out the book. It was an old children's book, the cover a little faded. What's this? She asked. It's called Sky Over Earth. It's simple but full of kindness. I thought maybe we could read a little together. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached through the slot to take the book. Their fingers touched for a moment. She froze. Ray didn't move. He felt her hand against his. Cool, light, but not cold. She pulled back quickly and stared at her own fingers like they had betrayed her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have. It's okay, Ray said gently. I didn't mind. She looked at him, her glowing blue eyes wide. Why would you touch me? Because you're not a danger to me, he replied. And because I wanted you to know that you matter. She shook her head, still confused. All my life, people feared me. They never touched me unless to test or to chain me. Ray's voice was calm. Maybe it's time someone touched you with care. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full of meaning. Slowly, she brought the book close to her chest and sat down near the glass. Can you read the first part? She asked quietly. Ray nodded and opened the book. His voice was soft, steady. The story was about a small bird that wanted to fly to another world. As he read, the girl listened, her eyes focused on every word. For the first time, she smiled. Not the broken smile from before, but a real one. When Ray finished the first chapter, she whispered, "I like the bird. It's not afraid." "Just like you," Ray said. She looked down. "I'm still afraid." "But you're still here," Ray replied. "Still trying. That's what makes you brave." She turned her hand over and looked at her fingers again. "Ray," she said softly. "Yes? If I'm not a monster, what am I?" He looked at her through the glass. "You're someone who deserves a name." She nodded slowly. "Then, help me find one." Ray smiled. "How about Lyra? It's the name of a star, bright and distant, but beautiful." She thought for a moment, then whispered the name to herself. Lyra. It sounded like music. From that day on, she had a name. And a name was the first step to becoming someone, not something. As Ray stood to leave, Lyra pressed her hand against the glass. He mirrored her gesture. They didn't need words. In that moment, trust was born. Ray couldn't stop thinking about Lyra. Even when he worked in other parts of the base, his mind always returned to the quiet girl behind glass. Her words stayed in his heart, soft, unsure, but full of hidden strength. That evening, after finishing his shift, Ray returned to the lower level. But this time he brought something more than food or stories. He brought truth. Lyra was sitting cross-legged on the floor, reading the little book he had given her. When she saw him, she smiled gently. "You came back?" she said. "I always will," he replied, placing his bag down. "But today, I found something important." Her smile faded. "What is it?" Ray pulled out a small data pad and turned the screen toward her. "I searched the base archives. I found records about you." Lyra hesitated. "You shouldn't have done that." "I had to," Ray said. "You deserve to know." He pressed play. A video began to play on the screen, an old recording. Several humans in white coats stood around a younger version of Lyra. She looked frightened, sitting on a metal table, wires attached to her skin. A man's voice echoed through the recording. "Subject X9 shows resistance to command orders. She refuses to attack targets. Emotional behavior detected. Recommend immediate isolation." The screen went dark. Lyra turned away, her eyes filled with shame. "I remember that day." Ray sat beside the glass. "You didn't do anything wrong. I didn't follow orders," she said. "They made me to be a weapon. But when they told me to hurt a child during a test, I couldn't do it. I froze." Ray's voice was calm. "Because you had a heart." She shook her head. "They said my feelings were the real defect." Ray showed her another file. "This one proves that after your refusal, the project was shut down. The war ended and you were locked away, and because you were different. Because you chose kindness." Lyra's hands tightened into fists. "They were afraid of me. Not because of what I did, but because of what I didn't do." Ray nodded. "Because you proved that even something made in a lab can choose peace." A long silence passed. Then Lyra asked, "Why are you doing this for me?" Ray looked at her, his eyes honest. "Because someone should have done it a long time ago. You didn't deserve a cage. You deserved freedom and truth." Lyra's voice cracked. "You say I'm not a monster. But look at me. Scars, scales, strange eyes. Who would ever accept someone like me?" Ray leaned closer. "I would." Her eyes widened. He continued, "You think your scars make you less, but to me they show what you've survived. You're stronger than anyone here." Lyra lowered her head. A tear rolled down her cheek and dropped onto the floor. "Do you still want to read?" she asked, her voice shaking. Ray smiled gently. "Only if you read to me this time." She opened the book and began to read aloud. Her voice was soft at first, but it grew steadier with each word. As she read, Ray listened with care, not to the story, but to her, to the voice that once thought it had no right to be heard, and now it was finally free to speak. The quiet days did not last long. Ray had been visiting Lyra every evening for almost 2 weeks. Their connection grew stronger with each visit. He brought her stories, food, and sometimes just silence, the kind that felt peaceful. Lyra had changed. She no longer looked like a prisoner. She smiled more. She even laughed softly once or twice. But peace never lasts in places built on secrets. That evening, as Ray walked through the lower hallway, he noticed something strange. 2 armed guards stood near the old elevator that led to Lyra's level. He kept walking, acting normal, but his heart beat faster. The guards didn't stop him yet. When he reached her room, Lyra was already standing, tense. "They were here," she said. "2 men. They scanned my cell. They didn't speak to me, but they know someone's been coming." Ray clenched his jaw. "They know it's me." "I told you this would happen," she whispered. "They'll move me now. Maybe worse." Ray took a deep breath. "Then we have to leave." Lyra's eyes widened. "Leave? I can't even step outside this cell. How would we escape a base filled with soldiers?" "I've been studying the blueprints," Ray said. "There's an old maintenance tunnel behind the generator room. It connects to the outer supply yard. If we make it there, we can use one of the small transport vehicles to escape." Lyra looked down at her cuffs. "These are still locked." "I brought a tool," Ray said, pulling a device from his pocket. "It might take time, but I can break the locks." Just then, a loud siren echoed through the hallway. Red lights flashed. A robotic voice followed. "Security breach detected. All personnel report to Level 4. Specimen X9. Contain immediately." "They know," Lyra whispered, backing away from the glass. Ray rushed to the control panel near her cell. His hands moved quickly, entering override codes and forcing the system to unlock the cage door. It clicked open. For the first time, Lyra stepped outside the glass. Her steps were unsure, but her eyes were steady. She stood in front of Ray, not as a test subject, not as a monster, but as a person. "Let's go," she said. They ran. Through dark halls, past locked rooms and cold metal doors, they moved quickly. Ray led her to the generator room. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a storage panel. He pried it open and helped Lyra crawl through first. Behind them, the sound of boots and shouting grew louder. As they moved through the tight tunnel, Lyra whispered, "You shouldn't have done this for me." Ray looked back, crawling close, behind her. "You're worth it." The tunnel opened into a large yard filled with old crates and dust-covered vehicles. Ray spotted a small transport skimmer. "Can you drive that?" Lyra asked. Ray jumped into the driver's seat. "I hope so." She climbed in beside him. The vehicle started with a soft hum rising into the air. As they flew through the outer gate, searchlights followed them. But the skimmer was fast, and the desert beyond the base was wide and empty. Lyra turned to him. "We're not safe yet." Ray nodded. "I know. But we're free." She looked at the stars above. Open sky. No walls. No glass. For the first time, she felt the wind on her face, and it felt like freedom. Lyra and Ray moved through the cold desert under the stars. The transport skimmer had brought them far from the base, but danger was still close. Patrol ships searched the skies, and ground drones scanned the sand. They hid behind rocky hills during the day and traveled at night. Ray used a small map on his wrist device, guiding them toward an old outpost far away. It was said to be a place where friendly scientists lived, people who might understand Lyra's story, but the outside world was not kind. When Ray tried to contact the outside with a small transmitter, the news was worse than he expected. Broadcasts called Lyra a dangerous weapon who escaped. People feared her, calling her a monster. Governments demanded her capture. Ray's heart sank. They stopped near a small town to rest. Lyra stayed hidden in the shadows while Ray bought food. Some people stared. Others whispered. One man muttered, "That's the beast from the base." Ray felt the weight of fear and hate everywhere. He returned quickly. "I don't understand," Lyra said softly. "Why do they hate me? I didn't hurt anyone." Ray shook his head. "Fear makes people cruel. They don't know your truth." Lyra looked away, sadness growing. "Maybe I was meant to be locked away." Ray knelt beside her. "No one deserves to be alone or hated. You have a choice now." "But what choice do I have?" she asked. "I'm different. I don't belong." Ray took her hand gently. "You belong with those who see you for who you are, not what they fear." She looked at his hand, then into his eyes. For the first time, she felt truly seen. That night, they slept under the open sky. The stars were bright and endless. Ray promised to protect her no matter the cost. The next morning, they left the town behind and continued their journey. Days passed. Their bond grew stronger. Lyra learned more about humans, their kindness and cruelty. Ray learned about her strength and hope. Finally, they reached the old outpost. It was a small settlement, hidden in a valley with green plants and flowing water. A few scientists greeted them cautiously. Ray explained Lyra's story and showed the proof he had found in the base archives. The scientists listened carefully and offered help. One woman said, "We will protect her. The world must know the truth." Lyra felt hope rising again. She was not alone anymore, but the battle was not over. The outside world was watching, and not everyone wanted the truth to come out. The old outpost became a safe place for Lyra and Ray. The scientists there helped her heal her scars and learn to live without chains. They gave her clothes that fit her and a room with windows that showed the bright sky. Ray stayed by her side, every day supporting her. Together, they worked on sending the true story of Lyra to the galaxy. The proof from the base archives, the videos and records were shared with news stations and leaders across planets. But not everyone listened at first. Many feared the story was false or dangerous. Some still called Lyra a monster. Others said she was a threat that must be destroyed. Ray held her hand tightly. "We have to keep trying. People will see the truth." A big hearing was arranged on a nearby planet. Leaders, reporters, and citizens gathered. Lyra was nervous. She had never spoken in front of so many. She was afraid they would judge her by her skin, her scars, her past. But Ray whispered, "You are strong. You are brave. And you are not alone." When it was her turn, Lyra stepped forward. Her heart beat fast, but her voice was clear. "I was called a monster," she said. "But I am not. I was created for war, but I chose peace. I was locked away because I showed kindness. I am not a weapon. I am a person." She looked at the crowd. Some faces were shocked. Others were moved. A few nodded quietly. Ray stood beside her, proud and calm. After her speech, questions came. Many asked how she felt, what she wanted for the future. Lyra answered honestly, "I want to be free. I want to live without fear. I want to help others like me, those who are different but kind." Slowly, the crowd began to change. More people spoke up, asking for fairness and justice. Protests started on many planets, demanding the end of fear and hatred. The leaders had no choice but to agree. Lyra was officially freed. Her record was cleared. She was no longer Specimen X9 or a monster. She was Lyra, a being with her own story, her own hope. Ray smiled, tears in his eyes. "You did it." Lyra looked at him, grateful. "I didn't do it alone." Together, they returned to the outpost, ready to face the future. A future where no one is judged by their skin or past. A future where kindness and courage shine brighter than fear.